All right, good afternoon. Let me start with a few programming notes. In a short while, we will be joined by our guest, Matthias Schmale, who, as you know, is the Resident and Humanitarian Coordinator for the United Nations in Ukraine. He will be joining you live from Kyiv. Then tomorrow, we expect the Secretary General of the United Nations, António Guterres, to do a stakeout on Syria. That'll be at 9:10. At the Security Council, and he will take questions in case that was a question you were going to ask me. And just to note, the Security Council meeting tomorrow is on artificial intelligence. That gets underway at 9:30 tomorrow. SG will do a stakeout at 9:10 tomorrow morning, Edie, in case you missed it. On Syria, we will share his remarks with you on... Yes, I just said that. Yeah. Okay, settle down. So we will share his remarks to you on AI mid-afternoon today, embargoed till tomorrow. And then at noon, we will have Giorgio Petropoulos, the head of OCHA sub-office in Gaza, as our guest. He will be joining you from Jerusalem to give you a humanitarian update on the situation in the region. On Syria, let me start with that. We, along with our partners, are continuing to support people across Syria as security permits. The cross-border operations from Turkey continues, and in the past 2 days, 59 trucks crossed into northwest, carrying food and health supplies, mattresses and sheets, among other supplies. Meanwhile, the Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, Tom Fletcher, is continuing his stay in Syria. He was in Homs and Aleppo in the north of Syria today. During his meetings with community members, he emphasized that we will continue to support the people of Syria and scale up our humanitarian response. Mr. Fletcher visited projects run by the United Nations and NGO partners and supported by the Syrian Humanitarian Fund. He also heard from women, heads of households, how humanitarian organizations have supported them and their families, and how funding for these projects need to be sustained. Mr. Fletcher stressed the role of women in the response and rebuilding of Syria is critical, of course. Mr. Fletcher also met with members of the humanitarian community in both cities. He said that our colleagues have shown immense courage and resilience in some of the darkest and most uncertain times. We're still witnessing these uncertain times, he said. I'm saying it, not him. In the Northeast, for instance, the situation remains fluid. As of yesterday, 44,000 people are staying in more than 260 emergency shelters, such as municipal buildings, schools, mosques, and stadiums. Partners are distributing hot meals, bread, and ready-to-eat rations, despite the limited funding available. For its part, UNHCR continues to respond to the needs of refugees and Lebanese displaced people across Lebanon, coordinating closely with the authorities and other humanitarian organizations in providing protection services, emergency cash assistance, core relief items, access to safe shelter, healthcare, and psychosocial support. Insecurity remains high in the Menjib and Ain al-Arab districts in Aleppo Governorate, despite the ceasefire announced on the 17th of December, which is set to last until the end of the week. Non-governmental organizations have not been able to access Menbij for more than a week, while critical infrastructures such as electricity networks and health facilities need urgent repair. And you will have seen that our special envoy for Lebanon, Geir Pedersen, left Damascus today. He spoke to reporters on his way out, and we shared that transcript with you. His basic message was that Syria was in need of greater humanitarian assistance and for the organization of free and fair elections. But I will urge you to read his text. And in Lebanon, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that the Lebanon Humanitarian Fund has allocated $31 million to support the response. The allocation prioritizes the areas most impacted by hostilities, including South Bekaa, Baalbek, Hermel governorates, and Beirut's own southern suburbs. Meanwhile, we of course are continuing to support displaced people in host communities as well as those who are returning home. Over the past 2 days, we and our partners have delivered medical supplies to hospitals in Baalbek, Hermel, Nabatea. governorates to support local healthcare facilities and address urgent medical needs. For its part, the UN Children's Fund is supporting preparing schools for the return of children to class. As of Monday, more than 800 public schools in Lebanon have been reopened to welcome students. Many of these schools, as you know, were used as shelters. We, as always, say children bear the brunt of these conflicts, and children on both sides, Israel and Lebanon, deserve a better future and the right to go back to school and to their normal lives. Meanwhile, reverse cross-border movements from Syria into Lebanon continues. According to authorities, around 85,000 people, both Lebanese and Syrians, have crossed the border since the 16th of December. Turning to the situation in Gaza, our colleagues from the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tell us that yet again the Israeli authorities denied a request from the United Nations to reach the besieged parts of the north today. That's Beit Hanun, Beit Laia, and east of Jabalia. Yesterday, we underscored how the vast majority of our efforts to reach North Gaza governorates since the Israeli siege began 10 weeks ago have been blocked. Most requests are denied outright. And across the Strip, humanitarians continue to face severe access to constraints as they try to reach huge number of people in need of food, water, shelter, and other essentials for them to survive. Throughout Gaza, we planned 339 aid movements that required coordination with the Israeli authorities between the 1st and 16th of December. They facilitated fewer than a third of those movements. Out of 96 humanitarian movements planned for the north of Wadi Gaza during the first half of December, just 16 were facilitated by the Israeli authorities. Meanwhile, our OCHA colleagues tell us they're monitoring the impact of new Israeli evacuation order for the part of Al-Burej in Deir al-Bala in central Gaza. The orders issued today encompass an area of about 1.2 square kilometers, impacting more than 23,000 people. That's what our initial estimates show. This latest directive is the 6th evacuation order issued this month, which in total covers more than 5% of Gaza. And tomorrow, the head of OCHA's sub-office in Gaza, as I mentioned, Georgia Petropoulos, will be our guest. And back here, Khaled Kari, Assistant Secretary General for Political and Peace-Building Affairs, briefed the Security Council for one of its periodic briefings on the situation in the Middle East. He said that among other deadly strikes in Gaza from 14th to 15th of December, at least 69 Palestinians, including women and children, were reportedly killed in 4 Israeli airstrikes on schools sheltering people who were seeking safety. He noted the Secretary General's recent report on the situation in Gaza, which said that a ceasefire is long overdue and that the coordinated collective punishment of the Palestinian people is unjustifiable. The Secretary General also asserted that any attempt to establish settlements in Gaza must be firmly rejected. There must be no attempt to reduce or annex the territory of Gaza in whole or in part. And this afternoon, Rosemary DiCarlo, the Undersecretary General for Political and Peace-Building Affairs, will brief the Security Council on the DPRK. And I was asked, I think by Abdelhamid yesterday, on the planned two-state solution meeting that will take place in June. I can tell you that as decided by a resolution on September 18th, the General Assembly will convene a, quote, high-level international conference on the peaceful settlement of the question in Palestine and the implementation of the two-state solution, end quotes. That's scheduled, as you know, in June of next year. It will be co-chaired by Saudi Arabia and France and will be preceded by one or more preparatory meetings as needed. The Secretary General is expected to participate in the opening segment of the conference. We, of course, stand ready to support the conference as necessary to ensure its success. The entire region needs urgent and irreversible action to enable the parties to re-engage on the long-delayed political path towards ending the occupation and resolving the conflict. This must occur in line with international law, relevant UN resolutions, and bilateral agreements in pursuit of a vision of two states, Israel and Palestine, two states, Israel, an independent, democratic, contiguous, viable, and sovereign Palestinian state living side by side in peace and security. Update for you on Yemen. Hans Grunberg, our special envoy for Yemen, has been meeting in Amman over the last few days with representatives from the government of Yemen in the Military Coordination Committee. The meeting that took place last week allowed for an exchange of views on key issues, including different types of ceasefire and ceasefire negotiations. Mr. Grunberg stressed that this engagement lays the groundwork for establishing the necessary conditions for ceasefire and achieving lasting peace in Yemen. And on Sudan, our resident and humanitarian coordinator for Sudan, Clementine Nkweta Salami, condemned the shelling and airstrikes on civilian areas in parts of Darfur and Khartoum that we have seen over the last week. Hostilities are widespread and have been reported in urban areas of El Fasher, Al Kuma, and Kabkaya and Kuntum in North Darfur, as well as Nyala in South Darfur and Greater Khartoum itself. Significant civilian casualties have been reported, along with accounts of destruction of homes, markets, and medical facilities. In a statement, Ms. Nkweta Salami warned that armed individuals operating in and around populated areas and camps that shelter men, women, and children who lost their homes because of the conflict are a direct threat to residents. This is blocking the delivery of much-needed humanitarian goods. We can't stress enough that civilians and civilian infrastructure, including hospitals, must be spared by the parties. And just a reminder, Mr. Fletcher is scheduled to brief the Security Council on Sudan tomorrow afternoon in their meeting. Turning to South Sudan, we and our humanitarian partners in the country, together with the government, have launched the Humanitarian Needs and Response Plan 2025. It seeks $1.7 billion to assist about 5.4 million human beings. Nearly 70% of South Sudan's population is projected to require some form of humanitarian assistance next year. That's 9.3 million people. This appeal aims to reach the most vulnerable among them. The people of South Sudan face a range of challenges that are driving humanitarian needs. They include conflict, climate shocks, economic instability, disease outbreaks, and yes, as you can imagine, the impact of war on neighboring Sudan. Since April of last year, more than 900,000 men, women, and children have fled across the border from Sudan into South Sudan, with another 337,000 new arrivals expected next year. And Jean-Pierre Lacroix, the head of our peacekeeping department, is in the Republic of the Central African Republic, where he's continuing his visit. Today, he was in Bambari to engage with local authorities, civil society representatives, and community members, including women involved in politics, as well as colleagues from the UN peacekeeping mission. He visited a site established by humanitarian community called Village Intégré, which hosts 3,600 internally displaced people. Yesterday, he met with the president of the CAR, President Faustin Archange Touadéra, to discuss the enhancing cooperation between the peacekeeping mission and the Central African government on issues including stabilization efforts for the upcoming electoral cycle. He also held discussions with the Prime Minister, Felix Molua, and other government officials, during which they evaluated how the peacekeeping mission there can further support the government's efforts towards peace and stability. Turning to Mozambique, where our humanitarian colleagues, together with our partners, continue to assess the impact of tropical cyclone Chido. Humanitarian colleagues tell us as of today, at least 184,000 people in the country have been impacted, 45 deaths reported, and nearly 500 people injured, mostly in the area of Cabo Delgado province. These are the latest figures from the authorities there. More than 35,000 homes have been destroyed or severely damaged. Almost 50 health centers and nearly 150 schools were also damaged and are no longer functioning. We're mobilizing support for the most affected families in Mikufi district in Cabo Delgado. We, along with our partners, have reached 2,000 families with food, shelter, and other essential supplies. Mobile medical teams are being deployed across most impacted districts to deliver essential health services. Efforts are also underway to combat waterborne diseases by distributing chlorine and water purification material, as well as providing information on cholera prevention. Mobile teams have also been deployed to support unaccompanied or children who've been separated from their families. And turning to another humanitarian crisis, this one around across the globe in Vanuatu, where our humanitarian colleagues tell us the situation remains concerning. One day after the earthquake struck the country, there has been a state of emergency declared for 7 days. To complement national response, the government has requested international assistance. We and our partners are mobilizing resources to respond. OCHA is deploying response teams, including a UN disaster assessment and coordination team. According to local authorities, damage is extensive, including hospitals, residential buildings and public spaces, roads, reservoirs, and gas pipelines. Many communities are cut off. Immediate needs include medical supplies and repair to medical structures, mobile medical teams, search and rescue teams, and heavy machinery for clearing, as well as safe drinking water. I was asked yesterday about Western Sahara and about the reported deaths of 2 Moroccan soldiers in Western Sahara. Our understanding is that the reported mine accident occurred in Tuizgi, which is north of the Minurso area of responsibility, during mine clearance operations conducted by the Royal Moroccan Army. The UN peacekeeping mission in Western Sahara, Minurso, does not have additional information from the Moroccan Army regarding this. The monthly demining reports from the Royal Moroccan Army to the UN peacekeeping mission indicate that in the past months, the Moroccan Army has been conducting clearance operations north of our area of responsibility, including in Tuizgi. Today is International Migrants Day. In his message, the Secretary General says this is a day to remind ourselves of the challenges migrants can face, from prejudice to discrimination to outright violence and abuse, and the unimaginable cruelty of human trafficking. As a global community, he says, we must summon our common humanity and work to reverse these harmful trends, and to flag today that our colleagues in the Department of Economic and Social Affairs tell us that international migration and its linkages to the social, economic, and environmental dimension of sustainable development. It's available online. And today, in a joint call to action, UN Refugee Agency, the International Organization for Migration, and the High Commissioner for Human Rights and the Special Rapporteur on Trafficking in Persons, alongside humanitarian operations, called on states to protect refugees and migrants in distress at sea. The call is prompted by the rising casualties that we often talk about here. Each year, thousands of refugees and migrants risk deadly journeys in desperate attempts to escape violence, persecution, or poverty. Double quiz for you today. Latest member state to pay its dues boasts the longest coastline on continental Africa, stretching for way more than 3,000 kilometers. Okay, Africa. Let's start there.
Somalia, what size?
Somalia. Somalia, which brings us to 150. Only how many more to go then if we already have 150? Yes, all right, but that's not the other part of the quiz. If we say shukran to our friends in Mogadishu, what language day is it today?
Arabic.
Exactly, it's International Arabic Language Day. 2 for 1. What? Well, today's international. I just. Do you think I make up these notes? I read yeah. No, it's not. Edie, you were way offline. You went to the Americas. We'll start with Deji. You'll go second.
Oh, really? Okay, so...
Oh, sorry, Pam. Well, sorry. Go ahead, Deji.
Okay, so first a correction. You said our special envoy for Lebanon, Geir Pedersen, actually...
Oh, for Syria. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
okay.
you.
My question here is, just a couple of hours ago, China and India reached a 6-point consensus on the border issues, and they both agree to continue to take measures to maintain peace and tranquility in the border areas and promote healthy and stable development of bilateral relations. Does Secretary General have any reaction on the latest development?
I think we welcome the positive result of this effort of a very important bilateral diplomacy.
And do you think this would set, let's say, an example how to settle international disputes?
Well, I mean, let's face it. We see a lot of international disputes. Well, let me put it the other way around. There are a lot of international disputes that don't get resolved, and we see it around the world. Those get the headlines. But there are a lot of international disputes that do get resolved, either through UN mediation or through bilateral information, bilateral efforts, those should be covered and saluted. Edie, please.
Thank you, Steph. On Israel's denial of access to UN convoy requests, is the United Nations given any reasons? And if so, what reasons are they given?
I'm not aware of any specific reasons, despite security reasons, that are given when things are denied. But I think our guest tomorrow will be able to provide you with a bit more granularity on what the process is and how it goes.
And on Gar Peterson's initiative for a meeting of all of the various parties in Syria to chart a path forward toward peace. How is he going to follow this up? Is he going to set a date? It's sort of an amorphous, floating invitation.
Amorphous floating invitations is what we do best here at the UN. I think he will continue, in all seriousness, he will continue the consultations, and as we do in any of these processes, when we feel things have gelled, dates will be set.
And is he still in Syria?
No, he left today. He left Damascus today.
And what about Tom Fletcher? Is he briefing from here?
No, I think he'll be he's scheduled, I think, to go to Turkey tomorrow, so he'll brief from wherever he is on Sudan. Pam.
A follow-up on the talks for ceasefire hostage release. The Israeli ambassador just said at the stakeout the talks are ongoing. Is there any UN person involved in these at all? And what are you hearing? Because there are reports that it's on.
The Secretary General has been in touch regularly with a number of the parties, including the Qatari Prime Minister, but we are not directly involved in mediating between Israel and Hamas. We do hope for a successful outcome for the sake of the people in Gaza, for the sake of the hostages and their families, and just for the sake of stopping a conflict.
And any indication that it's imminent?
I think no.
Yeah,
I mean, let me just say something. We have no indication beyond what we dutifully read and what you all report.
Thank you.
Madame, and then.
Just to clarify on the high-level international conference on the two-state solution, is that taking place in New York?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Stéphane. Happy holidays. With regard to the Secretary General, as you said, he's going to do remarks and Q&A tomorrow at the Security Council stakeout. Is he planning to do an end-of-year press conference?
No, he is planning, however, to do a start-of-the-year conference, as he likes to look forward rather than backwards. So we have something scheduled around the 15th to 16th of January. He will first deliver his priority speech to the General Assembly around those dates. Then the next day he will be here sitting down and answering your questions. Yvonne Murray, RTE, Irish broadcaster.
Thank you very much indeed for the full title.
Yes.
Steph, as I'm sure you've seen, Israel has closed its embassy in Dublin, citing anti-Semitism of the Irish government. And the Israeli Foreign Minister said that the actions, double standards and anti-Semitic rhetoric of the Irish government against Israel are rooted in efforts to delegitimize and demonize the Jewish state. Does the Secretary General have any comments on Israel's decision to close its embassy in Ireland?
It's a national decision that member states take to open or close embassies. We do not have a particular comment on that. Okay, yes, please. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Evelyn. Yeah, yes.
Okay, sorry. Thank you, Steph. Just a brief question on Yemen. that meeting with the Yemenis, is which Yemenis? The ones who have Houthis or?
It's the government of Yemen.
You mean the Saudi recognized
Uh,
government?
It's the government of Yemen
Which has
that is a
nothing
member
to
of
do
the.
with the problems
it-
they're having. Okay, thank
Okay.
you. And the SG press conferences, will he take more than 2 questions?
Okay, so let's be clear here. He will do a stakeout tomorrow. That usually around more than 1, less than 10. He will do a press conference here on the 16th of January, and as he usually does, he will sit with you close to an hour and answer a lot of questions. On that note, I'd like to invite you to hear from our guest, Matthias Schmale. Matthias, can you hear us?
I can, Steph.